Welcome to Bedtime Sleep Stories for Grown-Ups by bzbshoney.net. I hope you are settled in for the night and are ready to go on a journey of deep and relaxing sleep. We've put these special bedtime sleep stories for adults for anyone out there dealing with insomnia, sleep problems, sleep deprivation, anxiety, pain, or any other kind of issues preventing you from getting enough sleep and being fully rested and ready to take on the day. We truly hope these stories can help you achieve the elusive, deep, and uninterrupted sleep. Please enjoy this episode and consider subscribing to our channel to support and help the spread of these sleep stories to people all over the world with the same issues that brought you to this video. Thank you for your support and a deep and uninterrupted sleep to you tonight. Let's begin. You don't have to control your thoughts. With the cabin's door firmly shut behind them, Ava helped Lucas onto a makeshift bed. It was nothing more than a couple of worn-out blankets spread on the floor, but it was far better than the cold, unforgiving forest ground. "Here, lie down," she instructed, her voice softer than she intended. Lucas did as he was told, his face pale in the dim light of the cabin. He was clearly still in pain, and his eyes held a lingering fear that Ava understood all too well. She took a moment to look around the small cabin. It was as Spartan as it could get. There was a fireplace at one end, long since cold, and a small window that looked out into the darkening forest. On a rickety table were remnants of meals eaten long ago, an empty tin can, a knife, and a cracked plate. The place was abandoned, but it was shelter, and for now, that was what mattered. Ava turned back to Lucas. He had closed his eyes, a faint grimace of pain marring his features. A pang of fear went through her. They were far from any kind of medical help, and if Lucas's condition worsened... Shaking her head, she pushed those thoughts away. She wouldn't let that happen. They had survived so far. They would make it through this. She went to the fireplace, trying to see if there was any wood left. There were a few logs, enough to start a small fire. She set to work, her hands moving mechanically. The fire would not only provide warmth, but would also keep wild animals at bay. As she worked, a sound made her pause. It was faint, almost inaudible, but she was sure she heard it. A low growl, eerily similar to the creature that had attacked them. With her heart pounding in her chest, Ava moved to the window. She peered out, her breath fogging up the glass. The forest was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. She saw nothing unusual. Was it her imagination playing tricks, or was the creature back? Either way, they couldn't let their guard down. The cabin was their sanctuary, but it wouldn't hold against the creature if it decided to attack. That thought made her glance at Lucas. He was still unconscious, oblivious to the potential danger they were in. But he was safe, and for now, that was enough. She would make sure nothing happened to him. The lesson here was about perseverance. No matter how bleak the situation seemed, one had to keep going. Ava knew they were far from safety, but they couldn't afford to lose hope. They had each other, and they had survived so far. They would get through this. She added the last log to the fire, watching as the flames danced, casting long, flickering shadows on the cabin walls. It was going to be a long night, but they were survivors, and survivors never gave up. To have to stop letting them control you. As Ava stared into the flickering flames, she lost herself in thought. Her mind went back to their journey so far. They had been through so much, encountered numerous challenges, yet they had survived, always found a way to keep moving. That resilience, that determination, was their greatest strength. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Lucas stirring. His brows were furrowed, the pain evident on his face. She quickly moved to his side, her heart beating faster. "Lucas?" she called out softly, not wanting to startle him. His eyelids fluttered open, his gaze searching the room before settling on her. "Where are we?" he managed to ask, his voice rough. "In a cabin," Ava replied, trying to sound reassuring. "You need to rest, Lucas. We're safe here, for now." Lucas nodded, but Ava could see the worry in his eyes. It mirrored her own concerns. They were far from the city, from any form of help, yet they had no other choice but to press on. Throughout the night, Ava stayed by Lucas's side, watching over him as he slipped in and out of consciousness. Her mind buzzed with countless what-ifs, but she pushed them away, focusing instead on the sound of Lucas's steady breathing. It was the one thing that reassured her, reminded her that they were still alive, still fighting. The moon had shifted its position in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows across the forest floor. It was in that quiet solitude that Ava felt a strange sense of calm. Even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, they had found a moment of peace. It was fleeting, she knew, but it was theirs. The lesson here was about finding solace amidst turmoil. It was about learning to appreciate the moments of respite, however temporary, because it was in these moments that one found the strength to carry on. Just when Ava thought the night would pass without incident, she heard it again. The low growl, closer this time. The creature was back. Fear coiled in her stomach, her heart pounding against her ribcage. The peace of the night had been shattered. They were in danger once again. After a tense confrontation with the creature, Ava found herself in a new predicament, trapped in an underground cavern. As she brushed the dust off her clothes, she looked around, her eyes adjusting to the dim light provided by the glowing fungi on the cavern's ceiling. The eerie blue light painted the surroundings in an alien aura. Huge stalagmites rose from the ground, their jagged edges pointing menacingly towards the ceiling, while stalactites hung precariously from above, looking like they could plunge any moment. Ava felt a wave of despair crash over her, but as the initial shock wore off, she reminded herself that she had been in worse situations before, and each time she had found a way out. This would be no different. Determined, she began to explore the cavern. Her fingers gently grazed the walls, the rough texture of the stones, a stark reminder of her predicament. The cool dampness of the cavern sent a chill down her spine, causing her to wrap her cloak tighter around herself. As she moved deeper into the cavern, she noticed peculiar carvings on the walls. They were too complex to be naturally occurring formations. She traced the patterns, a sense of curiosity seeping in. They were symbols, possibly a language, but not one she was familiar with. Feeling the weight of her situation, Ava sighed, looking longingly at the small circle of light far above her. The portal that had promised freedom was now out of her reach. She sat down, resting her back against the cold wall of the cavern. She thought about the profound words of her mentor, who once told her, "Every obstacle presents an opportunity to improve our condition." Though she felt like all hope was lost, she clung to those words. Maybe there was a way out. Maybe this obstacle was an opportunity in disguise. She stared at the symbols again, squinting in the dim light. Suddenly she realized that they weren't just random symbols. They formed a map of the cavern she was trapped in. And there, towards the far right of the map, was a passage that led upward, possibly an exit. A surge of adrenaline shot through Ava. She hastily stood up and, with newfound determination, began following the directions laid out by the carvings. But as she advanced deeper into the darkness, following the path indicated by the map, she noticed an unsettling detail. The symbols on the walls started to change. They were no longer directions, but warnings. Warnings of a beast that lurked in the depths of the cavern. The same beast she had seen before she fell. A chill ran down her spine. She could hear a distant growl, echoing through the cavern. The beast was near. Before she could decide whether to turn back or go forward, the ground shook beneath her feet, and she heard a deep, terrifying roar that echoed around the cavern. The monster was closer than she thought, and it was coming her way. The reverberation of the beast's roar echoed ominously through the cavern, each echo amplifying Ava's fear. A sense of dread washed over her as she realized the danger she was in. She felt her heartbeat quicken, adrenaline surging through her veins. Should she run or hide? She glanced at the map once more, considering her options. She was in the center of the labyrinthine cavern now. She could either backtrack and potentially find another route, or push forward, hoping to evade the creature and find the exit. Making a snap decision, she decided to push forward. She took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and quickened her pace, her footfalls echoing in the ominous silence. Every shadow seemed to take the form of the beast. Each strange noise was its footsteps, and every flicker of light was its eyes watching her. Her heart pounded against her chest like a war drum, and she had to remind herself to breathe. Hours passed like seconds, and Ava kept pushing forward, driven by a primal fear and a resolve not to be the beast's prey. The carvings on the walls became more and more grotesque, their warning more urgent, but she forced herself to ignore them and focus on the path that would lead her to the exit. Suddenly she heard a low growl behind her, closer than before. She broke into a run, her eyes darting around the cavern, scanning for the exit. She could hear the beast gaining on her, its breath hot and heavy, its roars rattling the cavern walls. Just when she thought she was done for, she saw it, the exit, a narrow fissure in the cavern wall that the map had promised. She sprinted towards it, her heart pounding, her breath hitching. The growls behind her were now deafening, and she knew the creature was right behind her. Summoning every bit of strength she had left, Ava lunged towards the fissure, throwing herself through the narrow opening. She rolled onto the ground outside, gasping for breath, her body aching from the exertion. She turned to look back at the cavern, half expecting the beast to emerge, but the fissure was too narrow for it, and all she saw were two glowing eyes staring back at her before they retreated into the darkness. As Ava stood, dusting herself off and looking at the wide expanse of a new, unexplored world before her, she felt a strange sense of exhilaration mixed with relief. She was out. She was free. But as she looked back at the fissure, she knew that the ordeal was far from over. She had escaped the cavern, but the beast was still out there, in the dark, waiting. In the quiet that followed, Ava found herself reflecting on the lesson she had learned from her harrowing experience. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to move forward despite the fear. As she stared into the unexplored wilderness before her, she resolved to remember this lesson, but the feeling of triumph was short-lived. As she took her first steps into the unknown, the ground beneath her trembled. A strange sound filled the air, growing louder by the second. It was a rumbling, a rolling thunder, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. The last thing Ava saw before everything went dark was a massive shadow descending from the sky. Ava awoke to a pounding headache. Her vision was blurred, and as she pushed herself up, she felt a surge of nausea. She quickly clamped a hand over her mouth, swallowed hard, and took deep breaths until the wave of sickness passed. "Where am I?" she asked herself. A few fleeting memories of the terrifying chase through the cavern flickered in her mind. Then the rumbling sound, the descending shadow, and everything went black. Looking around, Ava found herself in a strange environment. It was darker than the cavern, with an eerie green glow illuminating the surroundings. The ground was soft and squishy under her, and a strong, musty odor filled the air. As her eyes adjusted, she realized she was sitting on a massive leaf, the veins of the leaf as wide as rivers. This wasn't the wilderness she had expected to step into. She was in a different place altogether, a place where everything was magnified 100-fold. The vegetation was massive, the insects buzzing around were the size of birds, and the sound of running water was a thunderous roar in the distance. It took a few moments for the terrifying realization to sink in. Ava had been shrunken down. She was in a world of giants. Feeling her heart pounding in her chest, Ava surveyed her new surroundings. She could see towering plants stretching into the distance, their massive stalks and leaves dwarfing her. Among them, enormous creatures moved, creatures that Ava would have previously dismissed as harmless insects. Now, they were the size of prehistoric beasts. She felt an unexpected gust of wind as a butterfly, now gargantuan, fluttered past her. Its wings, as large as billboards, caused the vegetation to sway. Ava clung to the leaf beneath her, fear threatening to consume her. Ava quickly realized that being small in a world of giants had its disadvantages. Her every move needed to be calculated, every step taken with extreme caution. She was no longer at the top of the food chain. She was now potential prey for any creature that crossed her path. In the distance, Ava noticed what looked like a massive, towering tree. She squinted, realizing that it wasn't a tree at all. It was her backpack. She had dropped it during the chase through the cavern. If she could get to it, maybe she could find something to help her. Gathering her courage, Ava leapt from her leaf and started her journey towards the backpack. She had to dodge giant ants and spiders, hide from titanic birds that were interested in her, and leap over colossal, deadly mushrooms. Each step was a battle for survival, and Ava felt exhaustion creeping in. Yet she couldn't afford to rest. Every second she spent in this giant world increased her chances of being discovered and devoured. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ava reached the backpack. Scaling its fabric was no easy task. She had to grab hold of the threads, using them like a rock climber might use crevices and outcroppings. After an arduous climb, Ava reached the backpack's opening. She pulled the zipper open with great effort and fell inside the giant bag. The bag was an absolute mess. Ava rummaged through the contents, desperate to find something, anything that could help her. The giant pencil? No. The oversized eraser? Nope. Then she saw it, a gleaming glint of metal in the corner of the bag. It was her pocket mirror. She grabbed it and held it up. It was now the size of a large shield. Ava recalled something from her physics class about how light could be manipulated and magnified through lenses and mirrors. She wondered if this could be her ticket back to normalcy. If she could somehow channel the right amount of light through the mirror, it could reverse the beam's effects and bring her back to her normal size. But just as Ava was about to position the mirror, a shadow loomed over her. She turned to see a colossal spider peering into the backpack, its 8 eyes gleaming hungrily. With no time to waste, Ava quickly picked up the giant pencil beside her. Brandishing it like a sword, she jabbed at the spider. It hissed and recoiled, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it seemed to grow angrier, its fangs bared menacingly. Ava gulped, fear gripping her, but she didn't allow it to break her resolve. Just as the spider lunged at her, Ava raised the mirror shield. The bright light from outside refracted off the mirror and hit the spider. There was a high-pitched sound, a blinding flash, and the next thing Ava knew, the spider was shrinking. It became smaller and smaller until it was no bigger than a normal-sized spider. Ava watched in amazement as it scurried away in confusion and fear. Panting with relief, Ava turned back to the mirror. If the mirror could shrink the spider, it could surely return her to her original size. She carefully positioned the mirror so that the sunlight could hit it at the perfect angle. Ava closed her eyes and hoped for the best. When she opened them, she was met with another bright flash of light. When her vision cleared, Ava found herself standing on the school ground, back to her normal size. She looked around, dumbfounded. Everything seemed normal. The students were walking about, chatting and laughing. It was as if nothing had happened. With a sigh of relief, Ava picked up her backpack, which was once again the right size. She glanced at the pocket mirror in her hand, the instrument of her incredible journey. She tucked it back into her pocket, vowing never to take it out again. As Ava walked away, she left the reader with a profound lesson. Our size and place in the universe might seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but our will to survive, our ability to think and adapt, is what makes us truly immense. The world is full of challenges, each one bigger than the last, but if we hold on to our courage and use our brains, we can overcome them. No matter how small we might seem, we each hold a universe of potential within us. Just as this thought crossed her mind, Ava heard a soft whirring sound. She turned around to see the science professor fiddling with the ray again, pointing it at a small rock this time. With a gulp, Ava quickened her pace. As she walked away, the rock started growing in size. Ava went home. She had decided not to tell anyone about her adventure, partly because she was not sure they would believe her, and partly because she herself was still processing what had happened. The pocket mirror lay heavy in her bag, a tangible reminder of her extraordinary journey. She found her parents in the kitchen, preparing dinner. They greeted her with smiles, asking about her day. Ava responded with a vague answer, not mentioning the events of the afternoon. Instead, she retreated to her room, claiming exhaustion. In the privacy of her room, Ava pulled out the pocket mirror. It looked as innocent as any other mirror. She tentatively picked it up, half expecting to be sucked into a different world again. But nothing happened. It was just a mirror. Ava felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Her adventure had been terrifying, yes, but it had also been exciting. It had made her feel alive, in a way that her everyday life never had. She put the mirror away and lay down, the events of the day replaying in her mind. The profound lesson from this section is the duality of fear and thrill. Often the things that scare us the most are the ones that make us feel the most alive. Every adventure comes with its fair share of fear, but it's up to us to decide whether to let that fear hold us back or push us forward. Just as she was about to drift off to sleep, there was a knock on the door. It was her younger brother Timmy, holding an object that made Ava's heart skip a beat. "Look what I found in Dad's study," he said, holding up a pocket mirror identical to Ava's. Ava bolted upright, the drowsiness from earlier forgotten. She reached out to take the mirror from Timmy, her mind racing with possibilities. It was the same size, the same design, and held the same weight as the one she had hidden in her bag. Her heart pounded in her chest as she held the two mirrors side by side, The similarities were uncanny. Timmy watched her with curiosity. Cool, huh? Dad said he found it in an antique shop. He doesn't remember buying two, though. This information sent a shiver down Ava's spine. Could there be more of these mirrors? And why was her dad involved? She looked at Timmy, who was still blissfully unaware of the seriousness of the situation. Timmy, where did you find this? In Dad's study, in one of the drawers, he replied. Why? No reason, Ava said quickly, tucking the second mirror in her bag alongside the first. She stood up, her mind whirling with thoughts. Timmy, promise me you won't touch any more mirrors you find, okay? Timmy looked at her oddly but nodded. Ava breathed a sigh of relief, thanking him before showing him out of her room. She then retrieved the two mirrors from her bag, placing them side by side on her desk. In the quiet of her room, Ava thought hard about the implications of this discovery. There were now two magical mirrors, possibly more, and they had found their way into her home. She couldn't ignore the threat they posed, but as much as she was afraid, she was also thrilled. The mirrors were her link to a world beyond her imagination, a world of adventure and danger. The profound lesson here is that reality often surpasses our wildest imagination. Sometimes life can surprise us in the most unexpected ways, and these surprises can be both terrifying and exhilarating. It's up to us to decide whether to embrace the adventure or run from it. Just as she was considering her next move, Ava heard a strange noise. It was a low humming coming from the mirrors on her desk. She watched, her heart pounding as the mirrors began to glow. As the sun set, casting long shadows in the meeting room, the atmosphere was palpable. Marcus, a charismatic leader known for his strategic prowess, was about to speak. The elites of the society had gathered, their hearts pounding in anticipation, their minds bracing for the unexpected. Marcus was a tall, imposing figure, his silver hair reflecting the wisdom of his years. He carried himself with a gravitas that commanded respect, his black suit a symbol of the authority he wielded. As he ascended the podium, a hush descended on the room. With a deep breath, Marcus began to speak, his voice echoing throughout the room. He spoke of the society's founding, of the sacrifices made, of the enduring spirit that had driven them since time immemorial. He spoke of their shared purpose, the unifying thread that held them together. Marcus then shifted gears, his voice growing somber. The world around us is changing, he declared, his gaze steady despite the murmurs that began to ripple through the crowd. And change, my friends, is not something to fear, but something to embrace. He outlined a series of proposals, radical transformations that were intended to propel their society into the future. His ideas were revolutionary, unheard of within the walls of their age-old institution. It was the first time in centuries that someone dared to disrupt the status quo, to challenge the traditions that had held them back. Marcus's speech was a masterclass in persuasion, weaving in personal anecdotes, historical facts, and compelling arguments. His every word left a profound impact, compelling the listeners to reevaluate their beliefs, to question the path they were on. His vision for the society was bold, transformative, and utterly terrifying. The room was quiet when Marcus finally stepped away from the podium. The members of the society were left to grapple with the bombshell he had dropped, their minds a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. In the hushed silence, one voice rose, a question echoing through the room. And if we refuse to change, Marcus? What then? Marcus turned back, his eyes glinting in the dim light. Then, my friends, he said, his voice ringing with conviction, we perish. As the word echoed through the room, the reality of the situation dawned on them. They were at a crossroads. It was time to make a choice that would dictate the future of their society. And so, they were left hanging on the precipice of change, grappling with the profound lesson Marcus had imparted. Change is not a threat, but an opportunity to grow, to evolve, to step into the unknown with courage and conviction. The end will be written, but not today, because today they stood on the brink of transformation, teetering between the safety of the known and the allure of the unknown. They were left with a decision to make, a decision that could alter the course of their society forever. The future was uncertain, the path uncharted, but one thing was clear: there was no turning back. In the wake of Marcus's words, the entire room fell into silence. His declaration echoed through the vast chamber, his final statement, "Then we perish," hanging heavily in the air. The atmosphere was filled with an uneasy tension. These words were a cold reality check that no one had anticipated. As the silence persisted, Marcus looked out over the crowd. Each face was a mask of varying emotions: shock, disbelief, fear. But amongst the sea of doubt there were a few, Marcus noticed, whose eyes sparkled with curiosity and anticipation. The enormity of the situation was not lost on anyone. The society that had for so long been set in its ways was now on the brink of change, poised at a crossroads where the future was uncertain. The path laid out by Marcus was revolutionary, filled with challenges and potential failures, but also offering new possibilities and the promise of survival. The leader's heart felt heavy. He understood their fear. Change was daunting, especially when it threatened to upend centuries of traditions, yet he also knew that their survival depended on their ability to adapt and evolve. The world outside was not the same as it had been when their society was formed. As it changed, so must they. "Consider this," Marcus resumed, breaking the silence. "For centuries we have kept our traditions, our values, believing they are what kept us together, gave us our strength. But perhaps it's not the traditions themselves that are our strength, but our ability to uphold them, to adapt them in the face of change." His voice carried a profound sense of purpose, resonating with the attendees. It was as if a spell had been cast, keeping everyone hanging on to his every word. This was the first of many smaller lessons that Marcus planned to impart. The strength of their society lay not in their traditions, but in their unity and adaptability. Marcus continued, "The values we hold dear, the ones we fought to protect, they need not be lost in the face of change. Rather, they can guide us, serve as our compass, as we navigate the unknown path ahead." Marcus paused, his gaze sweeping over the attendees one more time, marking the expressions on their faces. Their initial shock had subsided, replaced now with a mix of contemplation and understanding. They were beginning to see the picture Marcus was painting. "But for now, let's take some time, reflect on our path forward, the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead," Marcus advised. "We will meet again tomorrow. By then, I hope you'll have your questions, your doubts, and your suggestions ready. Because this decision is not mine to make alone, it's ours." With those words, Marcus stepped down from the podium, leaving the room in a state of contemplative silence. The members were left with a lot to ponder: the future of their society, the consequences of their actions, and the realization that their strength lay not in the rigidity of their traditions, but in their adaptability, their unity, and their willingness to embrace change. But as Marcus left the room, another figure rose, a shadow at the edge of the gathering. This figure, unknown to the attendees, had been listening carefully to Marcus's speech, and as he watched Marcus's retreating form, a slow, sinister smile spread across his face. "Tomorrow will indeed be interesting," he murmured to himself. As the night crept in, members of the society spent hours in hushed discussions, trying to grapple with the enormity of the situation. An air of uncertainty loomed, intertwining with anxiety and anticipation. Marcus's words had echoed through their minds, a profound realization that their survival depended on change, not just the physical kind, but also the metamorphosis of thought and approach. In the solitude of his quarters, Marcus reflected on the day. He pondered the questions that were likely to arise and the potential solutions. He also contemplated the anonymous figure who had left the room with a sinister smile. It was an anomaly he had not expected, a wild card in an already complicated scenario. At the same time, the mysterious figure was in the midst of his own contemplation. He reclined in a dimly lit room, a silhouette against the soft flicker of candlelight. His gaze was fixed on an ancient map spread out on the table before him. His fingers traced the faded lines, the routes, and the markers, revealing a deep familiarity with the land. A quiet chuckle escaped his lips as he considered the day's events. "Marcus, Marcus, you're walking a dangerous path," he whispered into the silence of his room, "and you have no idea what you're up against." Back at the gathering hall, the members continued their discussions, their voices a blend of trepidation and resolve. A few were already devising plans, suggesting strategies, their spirits buoyed by Marcus's words. It was evident that the idea of change, as daunting as it was, also kindled hope and a sense of adventure. A glimmer of excitement was visible in their eyes. They were on the cusp of a significant shift, a step towards a future they hadn't yet imagined, but one they were beginning to accept. Through the heavy discourse of the night, a profound lesson had found its place. The beauty of change lay not in the destination, but in the journey itself. They began to understand that change, while undoubtedly uncomfortable and challenging, also held the potential for growth, discovery, and innovation. As they looked towards the future, they knew it was the strength of their unity and adaptability that would guide them, not the strict adherence to unchanging traditions. The night wore on, and slowly the conversations dwindled. The members retired, their minds abuzz with thoughts and questions. As the last light in the hall was extinguished, a profound silence filled the space, as if the building itself was pausing, taking a breath before the dawn of a new era. In the silent night, a shadow moved. The mysterious figure slipped out from his quarters, a parchment tightly held in his hand. He looked up at the moon, a smirk playing on his lips. Tomorrow, he mused, will indeed be a day of reckoning. As dawn broke, the society awoke to a day of significant change. The rising sun painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, a visual metaphor for the new dawn that the society was about to embark upon. Marcus was up early, ready to execute the ideas that had been discussed the night before. However, as the members started trickling in, the atmosphere of excitement was tinged with a sense of anxiety. There was no guarantee of success, and their entire existence was at stake. Meanwhile, the mysterious figure from the night before, whom we'll refer to as the stranger, continued his clandestine operations. He had been working tirelessly, subtly manipulating events from the shadows. His smirk from the night before hadn't waned. If anything, it was more pronounced now. The stranger was ready to set his plan into motion, the parchment from the night before securely tucked away. Marcus was not oblivious to the undercurrents. He had noticed the stranger, an unfamiliar presence in their small society. There was something about him that didn't fit in, something that made Marcus's intuition bristle. But he decided to keep his observations to himself for now. The first part of the plan involved organizing the society's resources. Marcus and his core team were busy inventorying everything they had and identifying what else they might need for their journey. They discussed, debated, and planned out the next steps with a sense of urgency. This was a monumental task, but the energy in the air was palpable. They were ready to put their all into this. As the society busied itself in the preparations, the stranger moved stealthily, blending in with the crowd but always on the outskirts. He watched as Marcus and his team organized the resources, as the society came together, the very picture of unity and resolve. Yet his smirk never faded. At the end of the day, Marcus stood before the society. He spoke of the progress they had made and the journey they were about to undertake. The people listened attentively, their faces a mix of fear, anticipation, and excitement. Marcus ended his speech with a powerful lesson about the power of unity and adaptability, reminding them that their strength lay in their collective resilience and their ability to embrace change. The society took his words to heart, knowing that their survival hinged on their ability to work together and adapt to new circumstances. As Marcus's words reverberated in the minds of the society members, the stranger retreated into the shadows, the parchment now in his hands. A chuckle escaped him as he unrolled it, revealing a map. The path Marcus had outlined for the society was marked clearly, but with a significant alteration. The stranger's fingers traced a different path, one that would lead the society not towards survival, but towards an unknown fate. As the stranger looked on with a sinister grin, the society celebrated the end of the day with renewed hope. Unbeknownst to them, a dramatic change of course was imminent. Would they embark on the path towards survival, or would they be led astray by the stranger? We've now come to the end of this chapter. Please stay tuned for the next chapter of this story to be published in the upcoming days. In the meantime, please enjoy the sleep music that's about to begin.